When you're trying to build an engineering business or an engineering division for a firm, it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And you need to be extremely efficient, right? That's what we all want to do as engineers, be efficient. However, not only do you want to be efficient, but you need to be effective. And in today's episode of the Civil Engineering CEO, I have with me Michael Groselle. Mike is a licensed PE. He is the founder and CEO of Modern Engineering Solutions, and he's built a business on his own. He took a risk and he did it. And he's been super successful. And he gives the recipe in this interview of how you can be successful in business and in life by focusing on being effective. And he's going to talk about exactly how you can do it. But first, a word from our sponsor, Tensar.
Check out Tensar Plus,
the award-winning design software for construction professionals to design with geosynthetics and calculate their value on projects. Tensar Plus is simple to use with a powerful engineering system at its core. It leverages our decades of research and experience with soils all over the world, so you can count on your solutions working the first time, even in the most difficult conditions. Whether you're designing a crane pad or need to build a temporary road over muck, the cost, time, and carbon savings can be calculated, making comparison with alternatives simple. Specs, reports, and product data can be generated for your design, and training resources, research, and our third-party expert reviews are all provided conveniently in the software if needed. Usable both online and offline, the app is available in browser and on all major mobile platforms. Whatever you're working on, Tensar Plus is your toolbox for success.
I'd like to welcome our guest on to the show for today. Michael Groselle is a licensed professional engineer. He's the founder and CEO at MES. Mike, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Hey, thanks for having me on today.
So we're excited to hear about your story about, Modern Engineering Solutions and growing MES. But before we get there, just let's go back a little bit and take us through your career journey and kind of your path that led you to become the CEO at MES.
Yeah, so kind of funny. I guess it started out with college, and I didn't even know, most kids coming out of high school, they don't even know what they want to do. But I knew I wanted to do some sort of engineering. I played basketball in high school, so I got scholarship offers to go to different universities. So one of the ones I got offered to is the Citadel, and I accepted, and they only had 2 engineering programs, and it was electrical engineering and civil engineering. And I met the deans kind of for both divisions, and the civil engineering guy seemed way cooler. So that's how I started out there. And then it was just kind of from there. I really did fall in love with it. I loved all of it. Loved every aspect of it. But yeah, I guess going into how did I get started, I went into the workforce, started at Half Associates in Texas, came back home, and wanted to move to Colorado. So I moved out here because it's really nice. Like, I literally live in the mountains. I love it.
Nice.
Do a lot of outdoor activities, and I really like to play beach volleyball. And my current job was like really restrictive and not really welcoming to that. I wanted to go out at lunch in the court, train with a bunch of the guys in the area, or go to tournaments on the weekends, which would require leaving on Thursday sometimes. And we just weren't seeing eye to eye, so I quit. But I needed to still make money, and I had gotten my license. And so I had a few people. I just let them know, like, let me know if you need any help engineering. I don't have any work right now. And so slowly I started getting requests from either a friend or a family or someone close. I need this site plan or something. And that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what I like about that is, well, a couple things. First of all, your story about selecting civil engineering in college was interesting, because it's like when you have less sometimes when you have less options, the decision, of course, is a lot easier, right? It's like
Yeah.
when you go to a restaurant, if there's 2 things on the menu, it's easy. If there's 100 things, it's like, I don't know what I'm going to get, right? And it takes a longer time to make a decision. So that's interesting. But also, what I really like about what you said is, you kind of built your career around your personal goals, right? Wanting to, play volleyball and wanted to work out and do that stuff, which I think is great. I think that's I'm a big proponent of that here at EMI, like talking to our team members about what do you want to do personally? What do you want to achieve personally? How can we kind of help you? Because I think that creates a really good culture for a company, because it's not just like, hey, how can you help us make the most money? It's like, how can we also help you have kind of the life you want to have while you're doing what you're doing here? And so I think that's it's great that you were able to build around that, which is awesome. And so let's talk a little bit about your experience in sports. You mentioned you like doing activities. You mentioned volleyball. Talk about how your experiences in sports kind of shape your approach to leadership in the field of civil engineering.
Yeah. So, especially being a CEO, um, you work with a lot of different personalities, right? Like not everyone you're working with is an engineer. You still have to deal with accountants, marketing people, sales people. And it's the same on a basketball team or a volleyball team. You've got so many different guys coming together, and honestly, sometimes I even have a hard time relating. But I obsess over that portion of like, how can I kind of relate to this person and help push everyone's goals forward? We all have the same objectives. Do better work, do more sales, whatever it is. And then you get battle tested too in sports, so it's kind of like working on a project with someone. You're getting punched in the face, quite literally sometimes. Playing sports, I just think it's a huge advantage. Just getting just more reps, just working on teams.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I'm actually a big proponent of the overlap between sports and business, and I've read a lot of books around some of the greatest coaches in the world. In fact, one of the books I recently read was by Bill Walsh, or the late great Bill Walsh was one of the greatest NFL coaches ever. Basically took the 49ers from 2 wins to a Super Bowl in a couple of years, which is like unheard of. And basically his philosophy was like, I'm not going to talk about the Super Bowl. What I'm going to do is get people to do really good habits that good teams do every day. And if everyone does good habits every day, then, we're ultimately going to have success. And to me, you could use that in business. You can use that in life. You could use that in engineering. And so, I definitely think a lot of the stuff that you said there in terms of building habits and getting reps and doing more things is going to be helpful for you in your career. And I think that there's a lot of really good crossover there. And I think even in terms of leadership and like coaching in athletics is very similar, right? Because you have a team and you're trying to get that team to go to one place, but everyone on the team is different. Like you said, you're dealing with all kinds of different people, accounting, marketing. So can you really understand all those different types of people and bring them together? And to me, it's like a perfect example of it, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, the most common thing people think about is I. And that's where if you're really a true team player, you don't obsess in I, and you realize, this is even closing deals with clients is if you we can't just respond back with, this is how I feel. And then they respond back. It's like this endless cycle. And if you
Right.
if you just start to take their perspective into account and just reply back to what they need and kind of just shut out a lot of what you're worried about for yourself, it really drives results.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. I remember, way back in rec league, little league, the coaches would always say there's no I in team. And, at the end of the day, it was a very simple lesson, but it's still very applicable today, in every walk of business, which is great. So yeah, definitely. I think putting yourself in the other person's shoes is so important as a leader, both, to Mike's point, both with clients and with team members, right? I think anywhere around, that's just a great rule that you can follow, and you're going to have success if you do that. And so, Mike, let's talk a little bit about technology. Technology is such a big buzz today. There's lots of stuff going on in the civil infrastructure industry. Every time I turn around, there's a new technology that, a firm's using to try to get ahead a little bit. Talk about how your firm utilizes technology to kind of enhance workflow and improve your client interaction, especially in the kind of remote or hybrid world that we live in today.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the founding core reasons why I wanted to start MES was this. I the last place I worked at, we were still printing out shop drawing submittals, the two engineers would hand sign the review, scan it, send it out. I mean, just something so simple. This was 2018. There were so many tools even then, Adobe Sign or whatever, DocuSign. You can review the PDFs. I mean, the civil engineering industry, when I walk into a lot of firms, still do this. I mean, there's one down the hill here in Golden, and I applied for a job in this interim, and I walked out immediately. It was like, this is life force suck. Like, you tell there's just drawings everywhere. It's a complete mess. So just even as simple as the PDF marking up is still not there on a lot of, I would say, the small to medium sized firms. A lot of the big guys, they do it because they have access to a higher level of training resources. But I see a lot of middle sized to small firms just still having to print everything out. I don't know. What do you see?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of variables, like you said. Obviously, like larger firms may have um, the revenue to be able to invest in higher level technologies, but even at that level, that doesn't mean everyone's using them, right? So I think there is a happy medium where, a small to mid-sized firm can have a really good digital footprint if they're smart about it, if they invest wisely and they train their people on it, because it really, quite frankly, could save them a lot of time, right? And like
Yes.
drive up their profitability a bit. But one thing maybe, Mike, we could do real quickly, we didn't do at the beginning, but I think it's applicable to this part of the conversation, is talk about the size of your company and like how you're located and spread out. That could inform this conversation.
Yeah. So, I'm located in Golden, Colorado. I serve clients in Texas and Colorado specifically. I've got people kind of as a global footprint. So I have guys working in India, Vietnam, the Philippines, Serbia, Canada, and Central America. Sorry, drawing a blank on the country. So one of the things that's super advantageous for is if we get in a tight deadline, people work 8-hour cycles, and a lot of my team members are mix and match. So someone in Serbia could hand off drawings to somewhere here in the States. When I get done working, a guy in Vietnam can keep working on it. So like, we utilize Microsoft Teams exclusively just to really hone in on that collaboration. So does that help kind of build that baseline?
Yeah, no, that is helpful. And we have a similar situation here at EMI with, people working in different parts of the world. And I think that time zone effect is a real thing. Like, even Betty, who is in charge of all of our learning and development programs, who's 3 hours behind me on the West Coast, is even a big help, because I can get going in the morning, get a lot of stuff going, and then, get a bunch of stuff that I want to share with her. And then she's 3 hours behind me, so she can keep kind of working as I'm leaving work. So I definitely think there's a lot of advantages to it. And I think that having that kind of a footprint even makes your digital footprint and the tools that you're using, of course, even more important, because you're all working remotely and you have to be able to pass work effectively and stuff. But I think, to your point, I think there is a very variable success rate with these types of tools and tech across the industry, from smaller firms to larger firms. I just think that I don't think that it's easy enough to say, hey, bigger firms are doing it better.
Yeah.
Just because they have more money. That's not what I've experienced, right? We do a lot of PM training, custom PM programs for larger firms, and they've got the fanciest PM dashboards, run the reports, all this stuff. And I would say 50% of their PMs don't even know how to get the information out of it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So I will also, I'll say that I've gone down the rabbit hole, the technology rabbit hole is what I've coined it, is I see the shiny object and I'm like, oh, this will look so amazing. And then what happens is my team members they can't, because like I have all the information. And so I could just see how this thing's going to work, and like getting it actually down to those guys and it being an effective tool, because I'm kind of removed from some of those portions, it actually creates more work. There are like a lot of simple things. That's why I went to the printing and the PDF markups. Those are like just slam dunk things that I think can like super leverage your outputs. Whereas some of those small things you're talking about, these super customizable portals, which I have tried building in SharePoint. They've got Power Applications and stuff for. And I've since gone back the other way. I said it's actually easier just to run everyone through QuickBooks Time and not build it out custom wise, because I'm paying, I don't know, $360 a month for that subscription. I don't have to have a guy maintain it. And then I can go automate some other stuff, like maybe a proposal automation, some sort of like work, like document approval workflow that helps the operations. And then I'll give you another one. Went down this rabbit hole of the same thing in the CRM, building a custom SharePoint one out. A year later, I ripped it out and said, nope, going to HubSpot. They do it way better. It's literally $20 a month, and it can take just huge amounts into it, and it helps the little guys. So that's where the little guys, the medium firms, can come in. They can just buy a cheap license to one of these platforms, and they're instantly like 95% of the way there to the big guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what Mike's talking about here is really important when you think about where do I start with technology, or where do I go from here with technology in my firm, which is number one, thinking about like that low hanging fruit, right? Like, hey, if I get a new system to do this, everyone's going to be like, 90% more productive. So I should start there as opposed to screwing around with some other little techs and tools in here that's not really going to get me, the leverage that I need. So I do think that that's a really important part of it. I'm a big 80-20 person, right? 20% of your efforts drives 80% of your success. So figure out the tools and tech that's going to help you the most, essentially, and leverage that. And I think that's an important approach, because I think sometimes in the world of tools and tech, like the trendiest tool will come across your desk, but it may not be the one that's going to provide the most value to you and your team. So you have to be really, I think, aggressive in sifting through them, understanding what the end result's going to be. How user friendly is this tool? Is my team going to be able to pick it up? Are they going to use it, or is it going to sit on the shelf and I'm paying a couple $1,000s a month, or whatever the case may be, and I'm not really getting anything for it? So I think those are all really valid points. And the other point on this that I wanted to talk to you about, Mike, is because you and I think, are similar in this regard, and that we're both big on maximizing time efficiency for ourselves and our teams. But at the same time, we want to obviously maintain the highest quality standards of work. So, how do you think about that when you're thinking about all these different tools, balancing those two kind of philosophies?
Yeah. So, and that's part of the reason why I switched away from trying to build it myself, because honestly, others have built it, and it helped maintain a higher quality, like AR tracking, project budgets. It was more effective and simpler for the team to come in and maintain just the tracking metrics at that level. When we're talking about like plan productions or specifications, I really think setting up a good standards library of either CAD files or specs in Word documents with some just notes to whoever's writing those, that goes a really long way. And it's a very multiplying effect. It's easy to bring people in to train them to it. Something I've done recently in the last 2 years is I just make videos, like kind of like how we're doing a video call here. I'll do screen recordings. Like here's like the 5-minute video going through these standards, or the 5-minute video going through this spec book, just so it helps really bridge the gap between what they're expecting to be done and what gets done. Or and then it leverages your time too as the CEO or the project manager. Now you've got this tool that can be used by a limited number of people and get you a lot of the way there.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm a huge proponent of screen videos. We use Loom here a lot, which is an awesome tool online. It's free, and you can do quick screen videos. You can put your camera on or off, and you can walk people through stuff. And then again, I can assign something to them whenever I'm working. They might not be working yet, but we put it in our task management system with the video. They watch it, they're on their way. And like you said, you set clear expectations, because really, to me, that's where, when you're in a hybrid setting too, that's where you're at risk, is that if you're not communicating the expectations of what you want, then you're likely not going to get what you want. And it's probably not going to be their fault either, because they didn't know what you wanted, right? Because you weren't able to get it across to them. I use an example all the time where it's like, if a parent tells a kid to, hey, go clean your room, kid might go upstairs, take 2 socks, put them in the hamper, and say, my room's clean, right? Where parents looking for make the bed, straighten up the desk, hang up your clothes. And so any tools I think that we can use to make our expectations really clear in terms of the tasks we're doing is definitely a huge win. And so, one of the other things I want to kind of pick your brain on is I know that you have an early morning routine and you do some intense training, and I'm similar in that way. And one of my favorite books that I read that was most impactful was The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, who we've actually had on the podcast in the past, which really helped me to get a good morning routine going. But you do have a morning routine, you do a training. Talk about how that impacts how you lead and how you manage and lead your team at work.
Yeah. Well, it helped.
What does that routine look like? I'm curious to learn a
So
little bit about it.
I've gone all on sort of all sorts of spectrums of this as well. Lately, my morning routine has changed to be very simple. I get up at about 4, somewhere between 4 and 5, just depends. I'll get up between 4 or 5, brew the coffee, go on a walk, write some sort of level of gratitude in my journal, something I'm just grateful for, and then I just get to work. I've done a lot of the meditate or all this stuff in the morning, and I've recently been getting better results by just going straight to work for like a 4-hour block and then go work out at 8. And what'll happen is I'll send a ton of correspondence out to my team members and stuff because they're working usually at this time. And then I'll go work out and get a bunch of stuff back.
It's like you set up effective blocks. Like you do a block, you work hard, you communicate with people, give yourself a physical break, and then you'll come back and get some stuff back.
Things I schedule my whole day out. So although there are lots of ways to do stuff in Outlook, I prefer to use the journal because when I end up on the computer, I'm super ADD. So I end up like distracted. I start reading emails and then getting off task. So I'll write down the day before the order and what I'm going to do in terms of priority. And then I really do most days try to schedule meetings in the afternoon. Because for me, my most productive times till about 1 o'clock because I'm getting up so early. Then after 1 p.m., I tailor off. So it's like, how can I just gain the information for the next day?
That's great. No, it's good. I think the idea of setting up your day effectively for who you are is really important for everybody, right? Some people get up earlier, some people get up later, some people like to do certain things, some people can sit in the computer for a certain stretch of time, some people can't. And I like to do something similar to you in that kind of a game plan for the day that I have set up with the tasks I want to accomplish and trying to get that on paper. I've actually been using, not too long ago, I read Cal Newport's book, A World Without Email, which I really like a lot, which talks about, being as effective as possible and not getting those distractions like you mentioned. And he mentioned like the use of like a Kanban board, which some of you may have heard of, but it's really great. It's just like they use it in software engineering a lot, where it's like 3 columns. On the left is like everything I want to do, right? In the middle is like the things I'm working on right now. And on the right is like things that I've completed, basically. You just move the tasks kind of along as you do them. And that's been helpful for me. So in the morning, I'll look at my task management system on the computer, and then I'll like literally take sticky notes. And I'll like, if there's 10 things I want to accomplish that day, I'll put each one on a sticky note and I'll put them on 8.5 by 11 and move them across the paper throughout the day, which is really nice because it forces you to focus on a task and not kind of get distracted by other things. And then it's kind of just also like a big picture dashboard. Like if I get all these things on the board done today, then I know I'm in really good shape, type of thing, which I think is a good thing to like strive towards in your day,
I couldn't agree more. That's one of the things. So this book here, Ultimate Sales Machine, that was kind of what really pushed it for me. He's like, what are the 6 things that are going to be the most important things to get done the next day? No matter what, get those done and schedule those in. And it feels so good. And it's honestly, you can probably attest, is when you see all those things done at the end of the day and it's like 1 o'clock, or maybe it's 1 o'clock. If you already finished that list, you're like, right, no matter what I do after this is like a super win of a day.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that is important. And then what you have to get into, like the next step on that to go a little deeper, is making sure that the 5 to 10 things on your list are like the impactful things, right? Kind of which goes back to what you talked a little bit about earlier, like that low hanging fruit, those high leverage tasks. Because I think that's the other place that engineers or technical professionals get tripped up. Like they are really good at having a to-do list that they can check off throughout the day. But if you have the wrong things on the list, it doesn't matter how many boxes you're checking because you're not
Yeah.
driving the impact you want to drive. So I think it's kind of like a two-step process when you're thinking about being productive. Yes, you want to have a good game plan and you want to have a clear things that you want to accomplish that day. But at the end of the day, you do also need to make sure that you're focusing on the right things. And then one of the things that I like to use for that, which we cover in our one of our courses, is the 80-20 chart, which I got from one of Richard Koch's books called Living the 80-20 Way, which is a very simple 4 quadrants, and the axes are impact and effort. So you're like looking at everything based on how much time is it going to take me and how much impact is it going to drive. And obviously, if there's tasks that are like low effort and high impact, those are the best tasks around. But if there's tasks that are like high effort and low impact, like to your point, you want to do them at 3:00 in the afternoon, right? Like you have to do it, but it's one of those tasks you could probably do while you're almost like out of gas, if you will. So,
Yep.
so I do think that that's an important part of being productive, is not just how many things you can get done in the day, but what impact are those things driving?
Yeah, I couldn't agree 100%. I try, like, if there's some sort of report, like me personally, I hate doing reports. And so I know that it's not getting done at 3 in the afternoon, but it could get done at 5 a.m. And so I'll kind of take the hardest things, bump them up to the beginning of the day too. That may be the hardest. And whatever's easy or whatever, I try to push those later, because like, you could do that between like a meeting, like and end this call before your next meeting. You could do that little checklist thing throughout the day. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, no, that gets you momentum building up because you got those bigger tasks out of the way and you're being impactful right off the bat. So, Mike, how do you encourage and foster a growth mindset with your team at MES?
Yeah, so my nature is to be really restrictive, so I'm constantly fighting that habit. But I think if you instill a level of ownership into each person for the tasks that they're doing, and it's less of more like this is how it has to be to get done, and more like asking them how can it be done. That's really helped just them kind of be a little more curious. Not everyone's like that as well. I will say that not every person in a business has a growth mindset. Now these it's hard for, not everyone's like built wired that way. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think from a leadership perspective, understanding the different work styles and personalities of people, I think is one of the fundamentals, quite frankly, that I think a lot of people don't think about. You kind of alluded to that earlier when you talked about, putting yourself kind of in the other person's shoes, so to speak. And so it's not really like a one size fits all necessarily when you're talking about inspiring or motivating people, because different people have different goals, different desires. But I do like what you said earlier about instilling some kind of ownership in every single team member, and just basically just figuring out the best way to do that for each team member.
Well, and some people, and this was, everyone's on kind of a different spectrum of this. Some people really do want a very narrow lane to be in, and some people are very like broader thinkers. And so your job is to give them a couple constraints and let them kind of go. And some people want to like trip and fall a little bit, and some people don't at all. And so you've got to identify who can make a couple failures along the way and they're still going to be able to recover, and who's not as resilient. I think it's I don't know, that's something I've been really working on this year.
Yeah, so maybe we can build on that a little bit. You mentioned resilience there. Another word that comes to mind is adaptability. I know you're really, big on adaptability. Can you talk a little bit about adaptability, maybe how you had to be adaptable in your firm when you were trying to overcome a challenge or some kind of instance where adaptability came into play?
Yeah, I think a lot of engineers like to follow cookie cutter stuff, meaning like let's do it the way the last project was. But the real fineness of doing any engineering project really is the differences between the last project and the new one, and figuring out that solution. You may be using some sort of containerized wastewater plant, but how does it apply to the new site? How do I go about doing that? That's a great question. I'm a very curious person, so I really enjoy that kind of level of research, and trying to figure those things out, tinkering. Um,
It's like a process. You got to keep trying different things.
yeah, it's really, it's really hard. This is something I've been trying to figure out, is it's really hard to train others to have that level of curiosity, of not just like, oh, it's just like the old project, look at it and be like, oh, well, maybe that, maybe that doesn't work here. I, I don't know. What is your experience? Because I actually have been pondering this quite in depth.
Yeah, I mean, I think being adaptable, to me, like what you have to realize is that there isn't like one solution, right? I think as engineers, like in school, like we had an equation and we had to solve it, right? There's like one answer, right? I think in real life and in engineering, there isn't always like one solution, right? There could be like 10 solutions. And I think if we're married to the idea that there's only one solution, it's going to be hard for us to adapt, right? Because we're like, hey, we got to do it this way, and if we don't do it this way, then it's not going to work. So we're going to kind of give up on it. But and this is probably something I learned just because I, messed this up about a million times and finally had to like ultimately adapt. But I think just knowing that there isn't one way to do everything, right, is just a huge mindset to begin with. Because if you have that mindset, then you're immediately open to other opportunities and other ways of doing things, which I think is also really important for leaders in the civil engineering industry, because there are younger people that probably have other creative solutions that you don't just know about, right? Just because like we're older and I don't know about a software. I didn't learn it the way you learned it in school, right? But if we're not open to that, then we're kind of leaving a lot of potential, great things on the table, essentially.
Yeah. No, I even think, I'll give you an example that recently happened to me. I had a client blow up on me because we had some specs and stuff kind of messed up before it went out to bid. We fixed it ultimately. But then he provided another solution. He said, hey, we could remove like a couple feet of retaining wall by just shifting these buildings a couple feet forward. Or they were actually like little pads. Totally missed it. I mean, it's not wrong, right? The site still would work. And he makes this thing. And you get triggered immediately when this guy came at me pretty strongly.
Right.
And I was just like, whoa. And a lot of people will take that feeling and won't listen to anything that they said, even if there's a ton of value being provided. I mean, he's talking about maybe saving, in this case, it was only like $50,000 of savings, maybe,
Yeah.
but it's still $50,000 for us to spend a couple hours to move it. So that's been a practice, is just like removing your ego, staying curious. Because I mean, there isn't one answer that's right, like you said.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. And it's funny too, because going back to what you talked about before, where like, engineers like to kind of follow the cookie cutter type of recipe. I like to cook a lot. And, I'm an engineer. So like, just give me the recipe and I'll like follow it to a T type of thing. And my wife will be like tasting it or something. And I'll be like, I don't know. I'm like, I followed everything in the recipe. And my wife will be like, well, you got to put a little love into it. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you got to care about when you're cooking. It's not just about following the recipe. It's like, you got to like, you might have to change it up a little bit. You might have to throw a little something extra in. I'm like, I'm not thinking like that. I'm thinking like, give me the cookbook, give me the recipe. I'm measuring everything to a T and I'm throwing it in. So the point being is you have to be flexible. You have to be open to doing things different ways. And I just, again, would reinforce to those of you that are more experienced that are listening to this, there are probably people that are less experienced that might be able to give you different ideas because they're less experienced. And I think we need to be very, very open to that, because I've seen firms really leverage that effectively, which is a good thing. All right. So did you have something, Mike?
Yeah, I did. I was just saying, even as myself, so I'm only 32. And one of the things I think super, I don't know if it's undervalued or not, but I think it's becoming valuable to me, is that some sort of level of mentorship. So I'm 32. There are engineers that are 70. They know way more than me. And so even though I'm over here doing my own projects and stuff, befriending these people, getting some sort of level of mentorship from them, people who are way further ahead. I work every week with an engineer that's 15 years older than me, because he's got 15 years more of experience. And I work on some of his projects as well, because there's just so much to be learned from them. They've already made all those mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think too that I would bet that he's also probably learning some stuff from you.
Yeah.
right? Which is the value in that mentorship, because you can really learn, I think, in both directions. As long as, again, he's open to learning something from someone who has 15 years less experience, and I think that that's kind of the value there. So let's talk a little bit about continuous learning and improvement, which we're passionate about at EMI. Is there any strategies that you use to make sure that you are continuously learning and improving, whether it's personally or within the company culture?
Um, yeah. So continuously learning. For the engineering side there's like kind of two parts to it. There's personal development or maybe business skill development, which I think are kind of the same thing. And then there's engineering skills development. For the engineering skills, I really lean on the professional organizations, going to a lot of their conferences. The vendors do a really great job educating you about their products and how they apply. So I try to go to something like a WEF Tech once a year. I try to go to, there's a lot of like Rocky Mountains. There's a whole AWWA group out here, trying to attend those things, rural water associations. So a lot of those offer great opportunity to, one, also to network with people who have made a lot of these mistakes. That's really where I try to get my engineering content from, per se. Personally, I read books, do audiobooks. There's lots. I mean, some books the really good ones I'll listen to 4 or 5, 6 times because the value's so high. Examples like How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm probably on
Right.
like my 7th time. Because as an engineer, you're not naturally thinking that way. You think, like you said, the cookbook. You come in, this is
Right.
how it's done, and you don't really even think about other people's perspective. You're just so narrowly focused. So yeah, there's a couple books that I kind of like cycle through, and then I'll throw a new one in here and there. That's kind of how I also work with a business coach. I work with lots of different coaches. So I go back to that mentorship. I have even for training, for going to, I have a coach who I go do training with for lifting weights and stuff. I've got an executive business coach. I've got a guy who I work with for marketing, but these other people just have way more experience than me.
Right.
And I don't have to go learn and figure it all out. I can just go straight to the source. They're going to tell me their 40 years of knowledge in an hour meeting here and there. And then I can go kind of figure out how it applies.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. I mean, again, it goes back to the idea of that high leverage. Like if I have someone who's helping me with weight training, I'm not going to try to figure it out myself, because it's a whole art in itself, and I'm going to get a lot stronger, which is going to benefit me in a lot of other ways in life. Right. So kind of seeing like the benefits of where it makes sense to get help and like develop yourself, I think is really important in life and in business, quite frankly. Which I think is awesome. And I really like your point about getting out there and meeting people, getting to conferences. I think it's something that we lost a little bit the last few years with COVID, and it's coming back a lot now. And I think it's always easy to say like, hey, it's easier to do something remotely because I don't have to go anywhere. But then when you go somewhere to a conference and you just get that energy and those connections, you remember why, you like to go to a conference and what you can really get out of it that you can't get out of it when you're online.
Yeah. I mean, you go to WEF Tech, there's I don't know how many. I'm just going to say a number. It's at least 1,000 booths at this thing. And you can spend 3 days there, not go to all the booths, meet a ton of new people. You can, and if you like, let's say you're trying to spec out a pump, there's 20 pump vendors there, and they will educate you on what you need to be looking at and what matters for the pumps, because that's how they ultimately sell their product. And I don't know where you get that kind of leveraging of an activity in like just an online webinar.
Yeah, no, can't get that energy. That's the one thing you can't get. But all right, Mike, last question that I have for you is, what final piece of advice would you offer to young professionals that are aspiring to kind of create an impactful and efficient work environment as civil engineers? What would you say to them?
Yeah. I really do think the mentorship and coaching is probably what's magnified my success, if we'll call it, the most, is finding people who are where can kind of see where you're trying to go. and can help guide you along the way. That was the biggest one. And there are some other things that fall in there. You talked about the continual learning. I think you have to be, if you really want to grow something, you know, if you just want to have a business that's stagnant, that's $1 million a year, maybe you don't need as much of a growth mindset. You could find a few clients and do that. But if you're looking to like really build something and create a bunch of impact for people, I really think that growth mindset, that curious, just always learning, that would be my other piece of advice.
Awesome. Well, Mike has shared a lot with us around, not just being efficient, but being effective and doing things in an impactful way and thinking about your growth and the growth of the team around you. And it's been great to have the conversation with you, Mike. We really appreciate it. Once again, Mike Groselle, founder, CEO of Modern Engineering Solutions. Mike, thanks so much for spending some time with us here on the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thank you for having me on.
I hope you found that episode with Mike inspiring like I did. He really gave a lot of great tips that can be helpful in a world where we can be distracted by a lot of things, but we need to focus on our goals. Please consider subscribing to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.